Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the 2022 Subaru Forester Wilderness. Subaru has always been known as an outdoorsy, go-anywhere, rough-and-tumble brand with standard symmetrical all-wheel drive. But in the last couple years, with COVID kind of ravaging the world, a lot of people decided to start going outdoors more than they had in the past. And that has kind of grown with this trend of overlanding. So overlanding is not really full off-roading, but it is going further than you might go with a normal vehicle on dirt and rocks and gravel to go camping and go exploring and, see the rest of our beautiful country and world. So Subaru decided to take a couple of their popular models, the Forester and the bigger Outback, and turn them into wilderness models, which is to say models that are equipped to go a little further off-road than a regular Subaru might. So let's talk about what this 2022 Forester Wilderness is, talk about what is different for the Wilderness version, and then of course talk about how it is to drive. All right, so first things first, you might think that the Wilderness package is just visuals, but it's not. There are some changes to the front of this car, most notably the bumper here. This is actually a different bumper going on, and that is with the point of adding a better approach angle. So Subaru increases the approach angle by 3.5 degrees to 23.5 degrees. You do have these standard LED fog lights and some adaptive headlights up here. If we move around just a little bit, you'll see these unique 17-inch wheels with a Yokohama Geolander all-terrain tire. You do get these 4, and then you do get a 5th spare wheel and tire that is the exact same as these. Before we go further back, see if I can get this underneath here. There is a standard front skid plate going on, so that does help a little bit if you bash anything while you're off-roading. Then moving around to the side, your breakover angle is up just a little bit by 1.4 degrees to 21 degrees in total. That is mostly helped by the fact that this Forester Wilderness sits a 1/2 inch taller than a regular Forester. So you get 9.2 inches of ground clearance, which is pretty good for something like this. It's gonna be, higher than most, higher than what you'll need for most things. And then the rear bumper is also going to be different back here because they want to increase that departure angle. So that is up by 0.8 degrees for a total departure angle of 25.4 degrees. Now, if we move up to the roof of the Forester Wilderness, you'll see the roof rack here. That is standard, and you'll note these gold accents. These are kind of a standard thing for the Wilderness trim level, just to show everybody that you've got that special trim. Now, the nice thing about this roof rack is that the static load has been increased, so it can carry 220 pounds dynamically, which is to say while you're moving, or if you are parked and you're camping, for example, you can have up to 800 pounds on the roof of this Forester Wilderness. Now, popping the hood of the Forester Wilderness, you're going to see the same 2.5 liter naturally aspirated flat 4. It's a boxer style 4-cylinder that they've had in every other Forester for a little while now. It makes 182 horsepower all the way up at 5,800 RPM and 176 pound-feet of torque. Now, this does not sound super exciting because, let's face it, it's not. However, Subaru did change a few things with the drivetrain in that they modified the gear ratios of the CVT. So unfortunately, you can only have a continuously variable transmission. With the Forester Wilderness, you cannot have a manual or a conventional automatic. However, they did modify the entire spread of ratios that the transmission can use, and they modified the final drive gearing so that it's got a little more torque down low, which is helpful if you're moving slowly off-road. Now, the other thing that did let you get is a doubled tow capacity, which to me is pretty wild. That doubles the tow capacity of the Forester Wilderness to 3,000 pounds versus a regular Forester's 1,500. All right, now that is it for kind of what's different with the 2022 Forester Wilderness. Let's get behind the wheel and talk about how it is to drive. All right, so let's talk about driving the 2022 Subaru Forester Wilderness. As you can see, I am on back roads here. I'm not off-road with this, but a lot of my feelings from the Subaru Outback Wilderness are going to apply to the Forester Wilderness for the sake of talking about how this thing could do off-road versus some of its competitors. But whether you're off-roading this thing and overlanding and all that or not, people are going to be, driving these things as their only cars. This is not some crazy off-road build. This is just a car that you're going to be using day to day as well. So how does the Forester Wilderness do day to day, just in general and compared to a regular Forester? Like I mentioned, it sits about 1/2 inch taller, and it's on these all-terrain tires versus a highway tire. Both of those things don't really seem to do a whole lot as far as negating the on-road ride quality. In fact, I really like the fact that it's on a 17-inch wheel with a bigger tire because your ride quality is pretty good. You can hit bumps, you can hit potholes in the city, all that and it feels pretty nice. Obviously, it's not going to be as composed as a highway tire would be, but I think it does a pretty good job. Even, you know, when you're going through curves like this, everything is fairly composed. The steering is pretty good. It's pretty direct, and, you know, for this kind of car, no car will have great steering feel. These are not sports cars, but the steering feel is pretty nice. What I don't love is how the engine and transmission work together. Nothing in this class is especially fast. This is, like I mentioned, 182 horsepower from that boxer 4-cylinder, but the CVT on a back road, if you're pulling out to pass or something, it's just kind of, the experience it creates is not what people expect, which then makes you think something is maybe a little bit wrong. Now, I am, you know, on these back roads where you get these passing zones. Earlier, before I turned the cameras on, I did have some needs and opportunities to pass. So you put your foot down, you go to hard down, and you just kind of hang out at 5,000 or 6,000 RPM. Now there are fake shift points built in here, and those do kind of help things seem normal. But when the engine is cold and you look for some acceleration, even at moderate throttle, it would just kind of hang out at like 3,000 RPM, and it just kind of has this kind of grumbly, boxery noise, which is fine, but it's also a little tractory. And it's just not the most pleasant thing. And then this being a Forester versus Outback, it's a little less, you know, luxury focused. It's a little more simple inside, which means I think there's a little bit less sound insulation because this engine noise does come through into the cabin a decent bit. That being said, I do actually think, as much as I dislike CVTs in general and how they come across to a lot of people, if you're just puttering around and you don't care about the acceleration of this car, it works really well at slow speeds and in city driving and that sort of thing. So that's actually pretty good. Where it kind of falls down is when you ask for a little more speed. This is not fast. However, if you're not looking for, you know, pulling out to pass sort of acceleration or going down an on-ramp, it's pretty fine. So if your driving is more city and suburban than anything, you may not notice the drivetrain that much, and that's okay. I do wish it was a hybrid or it could have a hybrid as an option. A lot of the competitors are offering that, you know, Honda CR-V, Toyota RAV4, Ford Escape. They're offering hybrids, and Subaru has a hybrid drivetrain in the Crosstrek. I wish they would just put it in here because it would probably be a little more pleasant. As far as other things with you know, going and stopping and steering and all that, the brake pedal feel is excellent. Good initial bite. It's, you know, confidence inspiring all the way through the pedal travel, which is always good. As far as non-driving characteristics and just sitting in the cabin and everything, one of the best things about this car is how much interior glass there is. I got this car coming out of the Hummer EV, which is very tank-like by design, and it's got very short windows. And I got out of that and got into this and immediately noticed just how airy it was in here. It is wonderful. You've got these low door sills, a ton of glass, a huge windshield. You've got these windows kind of in front of your regular windows that roll down that kind of go ahead of the mirrors so you can see past there. You've got a gigantic sunroof. It's not a pano roof, but it's a big piece of glass. So it can feel very airy in here, which is lovely. And then to go with that, the dashboard is nice and low. The way the hood is designed, you've got a really good commanding view of the road, so you know exactly where the front of this car is and where the corners are. I really love that. And then kind of the matte black sticker on the center of the hood does help with some reflections. They say it's for off-roading, but in general, kind of helps, kind of nice. So visibility is great. To go with that, headroom is also great. Even for the second row passengers, we had my dad back there who's just shy of 6 feet, and he was comfortable, of course, because this is just a big box, and that compared to something like a coupe SUV is a much more practical design. So very comfortable. We were hoping for heated second row seats, but this is a Forester, not an Outback, so also not surprised they're not there. As far as, you know, infotainment and things, you have Apple CarPlay. You've got an 8-inch Subaru Starlink screen here, which is totally fine. Shiny plastic, which I don't love, but it's not bad. I like the fact that the screen is kind of a reasonable size. You've got real buttons. You've got knobs for your volume and your tuning, and then you've got real controls for your climate control. Is it all a little basic? Sure, but I really like it. It looks really nice. So very easy to use, very simple. The one thing I don't care for is this other little screen up here above the infotainment system. It's got your clock, your climate control settings, your outside temperature, which is all fine and good. My mom's 12-year-old Outback has all that as well on a much smaller screen. What Subaru did is they raised this up, they gave it a full LCD screen, and then you've got a picture of a Forester pointed at you, and all these little symbols and acronyms and abbreviations for all of the driver assistance systems that are all just lit up green because I've got them all turned on. And I just don't understand what purpose this serves. It's hard to decipher. I don't quite understand the point behind it. Oop, hello Audi. So that Audi's having a little easier time passing than I would in this. But I don't understand quite, the point of this screen. The other thing Subaru did is there is a front-facing camera on the Forester Wilderness, which is great. If you're off-road, you can see a little bit more. That's wonderful. However, if you push the button down here, it will come up on this little screen above the infotainment. It's interesting as it's coming up at 60 miles an hour, which I think is hilarious. But in any case, you've got this screen, which is great. It's really small and it's really hard to see, and I don't know why they don't just put it on the big infotainment screen, because it would be much easier if you're off-roading versus like squinting at this little screen up here. So that's just an interesting design choice. But the other thing with some of this, there are some buttons here that are just kind of haphazardly placed. So some of your driver assistance controls are controlled through the little center gauge screen between your main dials. So you control those from the steering wheel buttons down here. Some are controlled with controls down by your knee. And then there's two more that are up here on the roof console with the sunroof slider switch in between it. So just kind of buttons everywhere that I think could be clumped and make a little more sense. So I don't necessarily love that. The steering wheel itself is nice and thick. I like the grip. I like the style of it. There's a lot of buttons going on here, but these are actually laid out pretty well. You do have paddle shifters to control your transmission with no fixed ratios, but there are 8 pre-programmed ratios. You can pop this to manual mode, and then you can, hit the paddles and shift it yourself if that is anything you care to do. I think it would probably help off-road more than anything. So then, speaking of off-road, let's talk Forester Wilderness compared to other overlandy editions of vehicles. The thing that I like about what Subaru has done with the Wilderness is that they've done some actual hardware changes. So the biggest thing being they re-geared this car versus a non-Wilderness. So you're going to get more low-end torque, which helps if you're going slow speed off-road, which is wonderful. So the CVT has that different final drive ratio in it. Love that they did that. I love that they put actual all-terrain tires on it with a purpose-built 17-inch wheel, and they took the time to add a 5th wheel with a matching all-terrain tire as your spare. So this is not something that everyone's doing with these Overland edition vehicles that have become all popular now. A lot of people are going to still give you a steel wheel with a donut tire that is not suitable for off-roading. It's meant for highway use at 50 miles an hour. So I love the fact that Subaru actually considered, you might get a flat off-road, which means you need a 5th all-terrain tire so you can keep driving and either get off the trail and back to safety or continue your trip and not really be, inconvenienced that much. So they put a real 5th all-terrain on there. I love that they did that. There's also a 5th tire pressure monitor sensor in that wheel, so again, no big deal. You just pop it on and you're good to go. Other thing I like that they did do is that actual suspension lift. A lot of other vehicles just achieve that with a fatter tire sidewall, which great, but that's not going to give you everything you need. Then they've got that front skid plate, so they did do some real stuff here. Tyler and I took an Outback Wilderness off-road to a trail that was fairly hard for what that car can do, and that Outback has another 0.3 inches of ground clearance over the Forester Wilderness. This is 9.2, the Outback is 9.5, but in any case, it's the same wheel, the same tire, the same X-Mode software, the same re-geared CVT. They kind of use the same formula for all of that. And the Outback Wilderness did a very, very good job off-road in the scenarios we put it in, including getting some wheels up diagonal and all that sort of stuff. Subaru has done the same sort of software changes to the X-Mode all-wheel drive system in the Forester Wilderness as they did in the Outback. So I have every reason to believe that this would do just as well off-road given the software. So every Forester gets the regular X mode, which is kind of for basic like snow and dirt off-roading, anything that's not paved. What they do for the Wilderness cars is they give you a second mode of X mode, which is deep snow and mud. So that basically retrains the all-wheel drive and says, okay, let the wheels spin more to keep speed up, to keep you moving when you've got not a ton of traction. They also do some work to optimize your traction management when you've got a diagonal loss of traction, i.e. you might have your front right and left rear wheels up in the air. So with this car having open differentials, all that power just wants to go to the place where there's no resistance, i.e. the wheel up in the air. So they have this reprogrammed to understand what's going on and say, okay, clamp the brakes on that wheel to force the power to go to the other side. Does it work as well as a real, locking differential or limited slip differential? No. Is it much cheaper to do? Absolutely. So, you have to think these wilderness cars were done with a limited budget. So what can we do for not a ton of extra money to make this thing not cost way more than a regular Forester would? And I think in that case, they really did succeed here because they put the hardware in where it counts. You've got the real lift, you've got the real tires with that fifth spare, you've got that front skid plate. They put the upgraded roof rack on this car, so you could, tent camp on the roof of your Subaru, which objectively sounds horrible to me. Subaru or any other make and model of vehicle. I'm not camping on the roof of my car, but if you want to, you could. And then they did what they could with software. And, collectively, it's a package that really, really works, and it's very impressive. And then it retains pretty good on-road manners, which is the other thing that, you just have to make sure you can have. You don't want to go too far in one direction and have this thing be miserable. I got 31 miles a gallon driving out for the holidays to see my family, and the car was very well behaved and no big deal, even though it's on softer tires with a bigger sidewall and it's a little higher and all that. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2022 Subaru Forester Wilderness. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe right here on YouTube. Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. And if you'd like to join a community of fellow LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, head over to outmotorsports.com. We have a whole group over there, and we would love to get to know you. Till next time, please stay safe, be well. See you again soon.